Starting with the classic case, deathbed and breakfast. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. While the rhyme isn't true in all senses, Abby Dufresne Borden was her stepmother and the weapon was a hatchet, not an axe, it is right in the description of Jackson and Abby Borden being slayed remorselessly and beyond recognition in their beds the morning of August 4th, 1892. In the early hours after the discovery of the bodies, people only knew that the killer had struck the victims in their home in broad daylight on a busy street 1 block from the city business district. There was no evident motive. No neighbors and passersby heard nothing. No one saw a suspect enter or leave the Borden property. But the perfect Sunday school teacher, Lizzie, was inside the whole time. Lizzie was later arrested and charged for the deaths of her parents, but was acquitted by a jury in the following year of 1893 despite having lied about calling a doctor, never crying for her family, and buying literal poison right before they died. Cultural, religious, class, ethnic, and gender divisions in the town would shape the debates over Lizzie's guilt or innocence and ultimately free her. Overall, just being a spoiled, privileged white woman in this specific time played a role in letting Borden, the definitive killer of her parents, go free. And into the pit of bones we now go. National Geographic calls it the world's oldest M-word mystery, and it's safe to say that this killing is one that will never be solved. The victim was discovered in eerily named Pit of Bones in Spain. It's a fascinating archaeological site even without the discovery of an ancient killing. Researchers have found it's the final resting place for around 28 individuals who were somewhere between Neanderthals and modern humans. It's one of those finds that makes the scientific community foam at the mouth, and it turns out criminologists would probably now like this one too, because the victim had been laying exactly where he was thrown for a shocking 430,000 years. So how can we tell this just wasn't another burial? The others were of different ages, showing signs of conditions that would make daily life impossible without a caregiver, and most were actually, properly buried. The fact that the mysterious victim's wounds never started to heal made it clear no one ever wanted them to be discovered. The killing blow caused 2 identical mirror skull fractures, something anthropologists, crime or hysterical status otherwise, can agree is a common result of blunt force trauma. The body was then thrown down 43 feet into a cave to rest for thousands of years. A bit more recent history is a fear of water. On November 29th, 1981, around 7:30 a.m., actress Natalie Wood's body is found floating face down in the Pacific Ocean, about 200 yards offshore. She'd been one of Hollywood's recognizable names and faces. You may recognize her from airings of Miracle on 34th Street each holiday season. Eerily, Woods' mother had taken Natalie to a fortune teller for fun as a child. Wasn't so fun because she told Natalie that she would die by drowning one day. It inspires paralyzing fear in her as a child. She's afraid to even wash her hair and had reoccurring nightmares. Then Christopher Walken one day joins Natalie and her husband Robert Wagner and Dennis DeVerne on a yacht weekend. The group left in the afternoon on November 27, 1981, and Robert berates Natalie all evening. On the 28th, after a dinner and lots of drinking with Walken, the two reboard the dinghy at 10 p.m. Witnesses from a nearby boat claim they heard shouts at midnight. However, there's a party going on nearby. They thought it was from the party and they didn't intervene. One of the witnesses, John Payne, said he heard a woman scream, "Help me! Someone help me!" coming from the stern of Wood's yacht. But then he thought he heard a man's voice say, "Okay, honey, we'll come get you." But the tone was so mocking, he thought it came from the party. According to Wagner, there was a non-violent argument that broke out between him and Walken over politics. Woods was bored with it and went to bed, and Wagner didn't realize she was missing until he went to kiss her goodnight at 1:30 a.m. The Coast Guard's alerted, and Wood is found floating 6 hours later about a mile away from the yacht and the dinghy not too far from her. Angeles County coroner ruled her cause of death as accidental drowning and hypothermia. Woods' sister Lana expressed doubts about this being accidental, as have many, and it remains unsolved. Watch your step or you'll be looking like him, the Graubaul Bogman. The remains of the Graubaul Bogman were discovered by a peat cutter working in the bogs in 1952. Imagine the poor dude finding that. The eerie, well-preserved state of the body, thanks to the horrifying yet magical workings of bogland, has allowed experts to learn some incredible things. They can tell, for example, he lost a front tooth when he was somewhere around 5 years old. His last meal was cereal, they know that because the hallucinogenic ergot fungus was found in his stomach and intestines, but before the snap, crackle, pop, he had had a meat-heavy diet. What they haven't been able to determine is why he was killed, cause it wasn't the poison mold this time. One injury, the fractured skull, happened after his death. The broken leg, however, likely happened around the time he was killed. It seems as though he was hit with a blunt object that shattered his shin and swept him off his feet, just in time for an incredibly sharp blade to cut his throat. Whomever had done it had grabbed him from behind, Ramesses III style, and cut so deep it went to his spine. The Graubaul man died somewhere between 400 and 200 BC, and all signs point to him being perfectly ordinary ordinary Iron Age farmer, someone's papa or neighbor, who wanted him dead and why. Next up is two samurai with one stone. Sakamoto Ryoma is a iconic Japanese figure, best remembered as the man who brokered the peace deal between the warring provinces of Satsuma and Chosu so as to conquer the shogunate. Yet as Ryoma's influence grew, so did his enemies, and on December 10th, 1867, just a month after the restoration of imperial power, he, alongside his ex-sumo wrestler bodyguard and fellow samurai Nakaoka Shintaro, are killed. The bodyguard was the first to be slain after answering the door to a guest who wished to see Ryoma, who from upstairs hears this scuffle, opens his door to shout down at his bodyguard to knock it off because he thought he was wrestling with a friend. Instead, Ryoma is charged at. A confused melee ensues as lamps are knocked over and the room became dark. Ryoma is beyond injured, missing limbs and parts of his forehead, and he dies later that night, regretting with his last words that his killers caught him unprepared. Shintaro survives only to succumb to injuries 2 days later, never regaining enough consciousness to identify assassins, but mentioning hearing a specific dialect amongst the killers. The night of the killing was eventually called the Omiya incident. The professional killers were never discovered or distinguished, yet they are presumably individuals from a master shogun bunch. Ryoma is still venerated as one of Japan's most noteworthy and most regarded legends. How about a boat break and we hit some dry land? Like the Great Isaac Lighthouse. First built in 1850s to prevent merchant ships from disappearing in the Bermuda Triangle, the 152-foot tall Great Isaac Lighthouse has become more of a nefarious little participant in the area's mysteries rather than a protector. A barren island before the lighthouse was even built, local lore told of a ship that wrecked with no survivors except for a little youngin whose mother, known as the Grey Lady, can be seen roaming the island still to this day, and her wails of sorrow heard on full moons. First put into service in the mid-1800s, the lighthouse housed the island's only 2 inhabitants, its keepers. But the 4th of August, 1969, a small boat was launched to check on the lighthouse after routine calls had gone unanswered. Upon arrival, the investigators discovered the island was empty and there was no sign of its 2 guardians. A hurricane had passed over the island shortly before, but the lack of damage to the living quarters raised the question as to why 2 experienced lighthouse keepers wouldn't have stayed put where they were safest. Others believe that the pair were caught in a smuggling ring, or perhaps both kidnapped, but with no evidence of foul play to suggest anything untoward, the fate of both keepers remains a mystery. This is not the only time that isolated lighthouse keepers have disappeared under strange circumstances, after 3 men vanished from the Flannan Isles, a small group off the northwestern coast of Scotland in 1900. That's a famous one you guys probably know. It could be rum running, or pirates, or ghosts. All we know for sure is it's the ghost ship of the Outer Banks. Also, we know for sure it's one of the most written about maritime mysteries of the 20th century due to the complete everything about its abandonment. A 5-masted schooner, the sturdy ship was found launched insanely hard onto the rocky shore of the Hatteras Diamond Shoals, North Carolina on January 31st of 1921. Reports suggest that as many as 9 vessels disappeared during this period from the same region, none of which was ever heard from again. There were some speculations that the vessel involved rum running. However, when the investigation team from Barbados reached the vessel after days of effort in the rough sea, what they found was a deserted ship with all the crew missing, along with the crew's personal belongings, ship navigational equipment, logbooks, and life rafts, among others. Often known as the ghost ship of the Outer Banks, the disappearance of the Carol A. Deering, along with a few other vessels during the same time period in the Bermuda Triangle area, has been valuable information on the mysterious waters. Naturally, we had to build up to the famous Lost at Sea Cyclops. One of the Navy's biggest fuel ships, its disappearance marks the largest loss of life in the history of US Navy in a single incident. In his television program, Richard Weiner indicated that the captain of the Cyclops was rather eccentric. He was reputably fond of pacing the quarterdeck, wearing a hat, a cane, and his underwear only. Prior to the Cyclops' disappearance, there was a minor mutiny by some of the members of the crew, which was promptly squelched by said kooky captain, and the perpetrators were sent down to the brig. None of this really offers explanation as to what happened to the ship, but it suggests something other than mysterious force might have led it to its doom, if you catch my drift. Anywho, in March 1918, this massive ship set out to sail from Brazil to Baltimore through the Bermuda region, carrying 10,800 tons of manganese ore with about 309 crew members on board. Setting off a fairly good day, the ship's first message indicated no sort of troubles. That'd be a great thing if it wasn't also their very last message ever. An entire search of the area was put into action, but nothing was ever found of the USS Cyclops. No remains of the ship, any crew members aboard have ever been found. The captain never sent a distress signal, and no one aboard responded to radio calls from other vessels in the vicinity. The naval investigators investigators also failed to find a definitive cause for its disappearance, even though there was a number of theories suggesting various reasons. According to Marshall Smith, writing in Cosmopolitan September 1973, they range from a mutiny at sea to a boiler explosion which carried away the Radio Shack and prevented any distress call. So let me drop a knowledge bomb on ya in case you didn't know. It's called the true north. So the only true anomalous property about the Bermuda Triangle is that historically compasses at random points would point towards true north instead of magnetic north. This was due to the Bermuda Triangle, along with the sea off of the coast of Japan, sitting on something called the agonic line. This is where the magnetic field happens to line up with the Earth's actual poles. Because of this, the ship and the plane's navigational systems would be thrown off and would cause them to often get lost. Though in most cases, it could simply be corrected, or the ship just stumbles through the effects and is no longer bothered by it. There's a lot of places on Earth where magnetic north lines up with true north and nobody seems to have an issue there, however. The difference is that the angle is called magnetic declination and it's well known. Even a trained navigator should know how to put corrections in for it. Now couple this with our modern improvements of navigational technology where computer systems can just automatically adjust for magnetic aberrations, and the fact that due to our magnetic poles shifting around, the agonic line is no longer actually in the Bermuda Triangle. And wouldn't you know it, no more ships are getting lost in the Bermuda. And now that we've heard what we've heard and we've learned what you've learned, everyone's favorite Bermuda mystery, the Flight 19. The fate of Flight 19 and PBM Mariner has left even the greatest minds reaching for answers. When Flight 19, a group of 5 Avenger torpedoers, took off from Fort Lauderdale on the 5th of December 1945, they had expected their 3-hour training journey to be just as uneventful as the runs they do countless times before. Shortly after dropping their replicas into the ocean, Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, an experienced pilot, believed that his compass had started to malfunction and that Flight 19 had been flying in the wrong direction the whole time. With the weather getting increasingly worse, Taylor went against protocol of pointing a lost plane towards the setting sun. Believing that they were somewhere over the Florida Keys, Taylor adjusted the head in an attempt to navigate the Gulf of Mexico. Sensing Taylor's mistake, some of his men challenged his decision to continue northeast and convinced him to turn tail and head back westward. For reasons unknown, however, he once again turned the flight back around, still concerned that they were somewhere over the Gulf, and everyone followed. Their fuel was running low and time pressure was on. In his final transmission, Taylor told his men that once the first plane dropped below 10 liters of fuel, they would all ditch together for a greater chance of rescue. A few short minutes later and all transmissions ended. Certain that the flight had ditched into the ocean, the Navy immediately launched a search and rescue effort. 2 Mariner flying boats scrambled to search for the missing Flight 19. However, 20 minutes after taking off, one of the Mariners disappeared off the radar. Neither the 13 crewmen, 5 pilots of the Flight 19, nor the wreckages of the aircraft were ever recovered. The Flight 19 PBM Mariner was specifically designed as a rescue plane with the ability to remain aloft for 24 hours, but they were also nicknamed flying gas tanks because they reeked gas fumes so extensively, it was common for a pilot to search crew members before each flight for matches or cigarette lighters because you couldn't have them. After this Mariner disappeared, the Navy soon grounded all others. Michael McDonnell, who interviewed TBM pilots, stated in an article, former TBM pilots that we questioned expressed the opinion that the crew of the Avenger attempting to ditch at night in a heavy sea would almost certainly not survive the crash, and this, we feel, was the case with Flight 19. The aircraft most probably broke up on impact, and those crewmen who might have survived the crash wouldn't have lasted long in cool water.
At number 10, Jack the Ripper. For all my true crime buffs out there, this one is for you because we're talking about one of the most famous unsolved cases ever, and that is the one of serial killer Jack the Ripper. Even nearly 130 years after the killing spree that took place in London's East End in the late 1880s, no one knows who the person responsible for all this bloodshed was. There have been countless theories over the years as to who Jack the Ripper could be, but no concrete answers have been given. Judging by the fact that back in the days of Jack the Ripper, the technology we used to solve crimes like this was pretty much non-existent, it's not surprising that these crimes remain unsolved. The identity of Jack the Ripper is one of the most heavily disputed historical mysteries of all time. As it stands, the most widely accepted suspect was a man named Aaron Kaminsky, who was a barber who moved to London from Poland. DNA evidence collected in recent years suggests that this could be the man responsible, and that combined with the fact that Aaron was connected to other killings, being known as Leather Apron or the Whitechapel Murderer, makes this a good guess, but again, we may never truly know for sure. At number 9, the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin has been highly debated by both scholars and some religious people. The shroud is said to have covered Jesus' body after the crucifixion, and when you look closely at the staining on the cloth, it shows a faint image of a man's face and torso believed to be Jesus himself. And the more research and testing people do, the more muddled things get, making it even harder to find a definitive answer to whether or not this is really Jesus' face in the cloth. The search for the shroud's authenticity has been ongoing for decades, and there's no definitive answer of whether or not it's real. Carbon dating has suggested that the cloth is less than 800 years old, meaning that it may have come from sometime in the Middle Ages. But a study done back in 2014 suggested that perhaps an ancient earthquake that affected Jerusalem may have created an ionic image in the shroud, as well as, quote, altered the radiocarbon levels that later suggested the shroud was a medieval forgery, end quote. Right now there are more questions to be answered than ever before, so it may be a while before this mystery is solved. Now before we continue talking about some of the mysteries throughout history that remain unsolved, why not take a moment to leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this one. At number 8, Amelia Earhart. Another one of the most famous unsolved mysteries from history is what the heck happened to Amelia Earhart? I'm sure you guys have no doubt heard of the famed pilot who tried to fly across the globe but was never seen again. In 1937, Amelia departed on her journey to circumnavigate the globe, but after receiving an emergency message from her, people got worried, especially when communication stopped entirely. The search for Amelia began just an hour after her last recorded message, but to this day, Amelia nor her remains were ever found. In 1940, a woman's body was located on Gardner Island, part of the Phoenix Islands, Kiribati in the western Pacific Ocean. Along with it looked to be a campfire, shoes, and navigational equipment. The woman looked to be around Amelia's height, but the identity of the body was never truly confirmed to have been Amelia. Searches have continued to be led in hopes of finding some trace of the pilot and what may have happened to her, but so far we have nothing. There were rumors of a woman seen alive around the 1930s, so some believe that she may have just lived as a castaway, but once again, we don't know for sure. At number 7, Mothman? Now let's get into an urban legend that some believe could be true, though remains a mystery to us all. The legend of the Mothman has inspired many things in pop culture, such as the 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies. The original story of the Mothman comes from a dark November night in 1966, where a group of teenagers claimed that they had seen a beast with bright red glowing eyes. According to the Mothman's first witnesses, they watched as the creature launched himself into the air, unfolded its wings like a bat, and started chasing them until they were eventually able to get away. It may sound ridiculous, but many times legend is based on something real that we just can't comprehend. So if the Mothman itself isn't real, then what is it? We may never know. At number 6, the Titanic. Everyone knows about the Titanic, right? It was the unsinkable ship that went against its namesake and ended up at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. This historic tragedy has been talked about for many years and has been a staple in pop culture for a long time as well. The most well-known case of this is the 1997 film Titanic that portrayed a dramatized story of the sinking of the ship. Now you're probably wondering, well, it's not a mystery. We all know that it just hit an iceberg and it sank. But there's a lot more mystery to that than you'd think. Turns out that the ship's collision could have been avoided with a pair of binoculars. There was a pair of binoculars locked inside on the ship's crow nest, and the keys were kept by Second Officer David Blair. Unfortunately though, Blair was replaced in a last-minute crew shuffle before the ship set sail, and Blair kept the key with him, and therefore the crew couldn't unlock the box with the binoculars and weren't able to see the iceberg in time. Though this mystery remains kind of solved, there's still a number of conspiracy theories concerning the Titanic that you can always deep dive into.
Number 5. Clovis. We're taking a look at some mammoth hunters for this next point. This civilization is considered the first inhabitants of the New World. Hunters would use what's called Clovis points to get their next meal. They would use chipped flint. Now they had to hunt bison, mammoths, deer, anything that had skin to use for shelter, but also clothing. In fact, this 10,000-year-old civilization may have disappeared at the same time as mammoths. After all, with these historical beasts acting as both your gear and your food, the Ice Age ought to do some damage. Number 4. Anasazi. Before the first skyscrapers were built in the 1800s, the Anasazi built massive stone buildings as well on the sides of cliffs back in the 12th century. Some of these walls, by the way, housed up to hundreds of residents. They were huge. What's now present-day Massive Verity National Park was pretty intense back in those days. Scientists have uncovered some hints as to where these creative cliff builders disappeared to. Well, violence. Yeah, the thing that's still going strong today, thousands of years later, see back in the 12th century United States, long-term drought led the Anasazi Anasazi to violence, and perhaps they just wiped each other out. Other theories suggest that the Anasazi had to abandon their massive homes around the 1300s and then travel south. Either or. Number 3. Easter Islanders. Back between 300 and 1200 AD, Polynesians used canoes, not Carnival cruise ships, but canoes, like little canoes, and then somehow traveled all the way to Easter Island, over 2,000 miles away from Chile. That feat in itself is impressive. When you start to really think about the Easter Island heads on that island, it gets even more impressive. The Easter Island Moai statues, keep in mind there were hundreds of them at one point, reached up to 32 feet high and weighed over 82 tons. It was a sight to see until the 1800s, because that's when the civilization vanished. But what happened? Well, many of these statues were destroyed during this time as well, so history doesn't really tell us much. The population was decreased drastically, and the island higher-ups, be it priests or chiefs, were all overthrown. Well, what happened to them may give us some ideas for the future. See, Easter Islanders cut down so many trees that before those seeds could enter the earth again, rats ate them all. These guys ran out of trees, which means they ran out of rope or the ability to make more canoes. So naturally, a civil war began, everyone was freaking out, plus starvation. Also plus the arrival of Europeans in 1722, they immediately wiped out most of the remaining Easter Islanders. Then around the 1800s, waves of smallpox reduced the amount of island natives to just 100. Number 2. Vikings. I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan, and when they announced Vikings as their newest installment, I was so excited. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, but what actually happened to Greenland Vikings? There's a huge mystery around them. Well, around 985 AD, Eric the Red arrived with large fleet to colonize the island, and of course was subsequently banished for manslaughter. Yeah. So now we have two colonies on Greenland, a large eastern colony and a smaller western one. Now these Vikings didn't build massive pyramids, but instead they built stone churches that still stand to this day. These Vikings were around for a few hundred years, and at one point in time there were 5,000 Vikings or so. That's incredible, that's a lot of Vikings. But later on in 1721, a missionary expedition arrived, and there were not 5,000 Vikings, in fact there were 0 Vikings. Archaeologists did the digging, and apparently the western settlement died off around 1400 AD, and just decades later the eastern settlement was, well, simply abandoned. And there's also a handful of family fun movies that hint at what happened to them as well. The Ice Age. Well, the small one in the 14th century, but still an ice age nonetheless. Number 1. The Indus River Valley Civilization. What's now modern Pakistan was one of the world's earliest societies. Also referred to as the Harappan civilization or the Indus, were actually quite large. We're talking about Vikings in the thousands, but the Indus reached about 5 million. Aside from the other earliest civilizations, be it Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, they were considered the most extensive. The world's first ever dentist came from the Indus Valley, so thank you. Something way more interesting though than dentist facts is that when compared to Egyptian ancient cultures, the Indus never built any palaces or temples, meaning there were no priests or kings. But we still get to study ancient texts, those are always fun and confusing. The Indus had a language that we're slowly but surely decoding today, but even so there's still around 250 to 500 characters that remain a mystery. Number 10. History. Ruling alongside the pharaoh Akhenaten from 1353 to 1336 BC. Queen Nefertiti, aka the Lady of Grace, aka Hereditary Princess, was born in 1370 BCE. She was born in the Egyptian city of Thebes, and she was only 15 years old when she married the 16-year-old Akhenaten. She worshipped the sun god Aten, and alongside her young husband, she built a new capital city called Amarna, and she also created a new religion, so how's that? She ruled over what's considered the wealthiest period in Egypt history. Nefertiti had 6 children, which were all daughters, which may have had something to do with why we don't know much about her today, but I'll get into that much later on. Number 9. Her death. After changing Egypt's religious and political structure, soaring to new heights as a woman in the Egyptian court, the queen just vanished, just like that. And on this video, we're going to try and figure out what may have happened to her. During the 12th year of the 17 that her husband ruled for, historical records seem to have just wiped out the queen's legacy. She was gone from everything. Many believe that she didn't actually die, but rather she disguised herself and continued to rule. The next in line after Akhenaten's reign was the pharaoh Smenkhare. Was that really Nefertiti in disguise? I hope so. That would be pretty sweet if we proved that and figured that out. I'm really rooting for that. The reason we believe that she may have disguised herself as a man is because of the female pharaoh, Hatshepsut, because they ruled with a fake beard in the 15th century. It's known that they had a big traditional fake beard. It's cool. It's like kind of flashy. I kind of want one. I can't grow a beard or a mustache, so I kind of want a fake one myself. Lastly, there's a theory that the reason Nefertiti was banished was because she couldn't produce a male heir. We've gotten closer to uncovering the truth though recently in 2015, when Nicholas Reeves and Mamdouh El-Damadi found what they think is a hidden doorway in King Tut's tomb that contains perhaps the sarcophagus of the lost queen. I'll get into that shortly, but first we need to talk about her modern day origins. Number 8. Berlin bust. Perhaps one of the most popular ancient sculptures of all time was found on December 6, 1913. German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt found this on the floor of the Royal Sculptures Workshop. This figure has some unforgettable details. I mean, first of all, she's breathtaking to look at, and the blue headpiece. These are all important. It was clear that this was Queen Nefertiti from the start. The German team split everything with the Egyptian government, so currently this bust is being held in Berlin. It draws in about 50,000 visitors a year to Berlin's newest museum, a little piece of Egypt all the way over there. We love it. Now, fun little fact about this modern bust, in 2009 there were scans done to it, technology, nice, and it's revealed that underneath this painted layer is limestone carving of a woman so detailed that you can see wrinkles in her cheeks, even a bump on her nose as well. That's like 4K Egypt, it's crazy. Back in 2016, these two artists secretly 3D scanned the bust of the lost queen and then straight up released the files online as a free download. The future is here, I guess. Also, that's a little invasive. Just scanning your head, like that's really? But 3 years later, officials decided to release that to the public, so here it is, take a look. The Queen Nefertiti 3D bust, scanned by James Bond secretly. Number 7, Monuments Men. It wasn't always a smooth ride for this specific bust. Sometimes it was a bust. I had to, why not? She spent 11 years in the private residence of Germany's expedition founder, Jacques Simon. Cut to 9 years later, that's when King Tut's tomb was discovered, a totally separate event, unbeknownst to them, connected. Howard Carter found King Tut's tomb in 1922, and of course afterwards the entire world was watching. Just a year later, her bust was finally moved to Berlin. It had a rocky go. It remained in Germans' hands throughout the entire war. Even that big ugly dude with a little mustache said that he himself would never relinquish the head of the queen. So thanks, Spittler. I can't say his name because YouTube. It was hidden in a salt mine throughout the entire Cold War. The Germans would arrive too late though sometimes when stealing rich pieces of art. Like in 1940, for example, they arrived at the Louvre and it was bare. The Mona Lisa was now in a child's bedroom. Curators had moved the pieces, thankfully. But when a bust of a long-lost queen of Egypt was being held in a salt mine in the town of Merkers, the Monuments Men literally saved history. When Sergeant Kenneth C. Lindsay led his team down the 35 miles of tunnel, and aside from the queen's bust, billions of dollars of gold was also found down there, all stolen from the Germans. Number 6. Hidden chamber. Ancient Egyptian architecture is mind-blowing. Even to this day, we're trying to figure out how exactly everything was built. More and more secrets are coming out of all these hidden tombs. It's fascinating. Technology is for sure a helping hand when it comes to learning about our past queens and kings. And for Queen Nefertiti, her final resting place is now believed to be in a secret chamber in King Tut's tomb. This was years ago. Egypt Tourist Minister Hisham Zazou said the discovery was like a big bang. And I see no lies. It's perhaps one of the biggest discoveries of the 21st century. After radar tests were conducted, Egyptian officials were 90% sure they found a hidden chamber. And it was also full of treasures, so that's neat. And also, we're onto something. Number 5. The USS Scorpion. The ill-fated USS Scorpion was an American nuclear submarine that mysteriously disappeared in the Atlantic Ocean in 1968. Nice, a nuke sub, just gone. Okay, guess we'll find it hopefully one day. On board was a crew of 99, and the disappearance of the submarine sent ripples through the naval community. This was a big deal. This is a very interesting time. The USS Scorpion was expected to return to its port in Norfolk, Virginia, but its days turned into weeks, so it was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. Despite deploying massive search operations, not a single trace of the sub was ever found, as if swallowed whole by the ocean. It wasn't until several months later that the wreckage was finally located. So some of these have brighter endings. Some of them we can see wreckage and we can put together a story, but most of the time we can't find anything. So this is kind of lucky, if I can say that. The remnants of the once formidable USS Scorpion were found resting at an incredible depth of 10,000 feet below the ocean's surface. What led to the tragic end of such an advanced submarine? A little bit different. This was a sub, not a ship, so we have more questions this time around, if anything. Number 4. The Mary Celeste. The disappearance of the Mary Celeste is a famous maritime mystery that occurred back in 1872. Now, the ship was found adrift adrift in the Atlantic Ocean with no crew on board. Again, another haunting image, something you never want to roll up to, despite everything appearing to be in order on board. Now, numerous theories have been put forward to explain this event. The Mary Celeste was discovered by another vessel, the Dei Gratia, and upon investigation, it was found that the ship's cargo and provisions were largely intact. However, there were no signs of struggle at all or no obvious explanation for the crew's disappearance, so abducted by aliens. No one knows. This is so random. One theory suggested the crew may have abandoned the ship due to a perceived danger, such as a leak or a fire in the cargo hold, but subsequent investigations found no evidence to support any of those theories. So again, we're left here clueless and very scared. Number 3, the USS Indianapolis. The USS Indianapolis was a United States Navy cruiser that suddenly vanished in 1945 during World War II. Now, the ship had just completed a top secret mission delivering components of the atomic weapon that would soon be later dropped on Hiroshima. So this was again, a big trip historically. Now, tragically, the ship was then torpedoed by a Japanese submarine and then it sank in the Philippine Sea. The incident resulted in the loss of hundreds of lives. The initial disappearance of the USS Indianapolis, at first it went unnoticed, and it wasn't until days later that survivors were spotted by chance during a routine aerial patrol. Again, that's haunting, just to see people in the sea. I mean, better than what we've heard so far, but still, what do you do at that point? By that time, many crew members had succumbed to exposure, dehydration, or shark attacks. The delayed rescue raised questions about why the distress signals from the ship had gone unnoticed in the first place. Investigations revealed that the messages had been mishandled, and the ship's failure to reach its expected destination had not triggered a search operation. Things have changed now. Now we're apparently running by text messages down below, so who knows. Number 2, the USS Greyback. The USS Greyback was an American submarine that prowled the expanses of the Pacific Ocean, striking fear into the hearts of enemy vessels, or at least it was supposed to, until it vanished. With a successful combat record, the Greyback was considered an essential asset, until it vanished in 1944. The Greyback failed to return from patrol one day, and an air of disbelief surrounded its sudden and unexplained disappearance. Nobody knew what to do first at this point. This is, where do you start with a missing ship or a sub? The official explanation pointed towards an operational error in deciphering the submarine's last known position, which is something we're kind of hearing about lately in the news. This misinterpretation tragically led to the search efforts of being astray, and the Greyback was declared lost at sea forever. For many decades, the submarine's fate remained shrouded in mystery. Its whereabouts were unknown, but then, in a chilling revelation, the Greyback's watery grave was finally discovered recently in 2019. Yeah, it takes a while to find things. Number 1, the KRI Nengala. During a routine training exercise in the Bali Sea, the KRI Nengala, a German-made vessel, set out with 53 brave souls on board. Now, suddenly, an unsettling turn of events unfolded. The Nengala vanished with no trace, no signal, nothing. It just left behind a wake of uncertainty and fear. A massive international search and rescue operation was immediately launched as nations rallied together in a race against time to locate this missing submarine and its crew. Naval vessels, aircraft, and the best technology they can get their hands on, they were all deployed in a desperate search for answers. Days turned into nights, and loved ones were waiting anxiously for any news. But finally, a chilling discovery shattered all hope that remained. The wreckage of KRI Nengala was found on the ocean floor, fragmented into 3 haunting parts. So it's believed that a blackout occurred at some point, leading to a loss of control over the submarine, and then, well, in the haunting depths of the Bali Sea, the vessel succumbed to all the immense pressure and its hull compromised.
Alright, I feel like the biggest and coolest mystery is the first one we gotta talk about. What is the Bermuda Triangle? During the past century, more than 50 ships and 20 aircraft sailed into oblivion in the area known as the Bermuda Triangle, a stretch that runs between the 3 points between Miami, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda. Exactly what happened to the ships and aircrafts isn't always known. Most disappeared without distress calls and little, if any, debris. But why is this emphasis on the Devil's Triangle when statistically it isn't even actually in the top 10 for the most dangerous areas of the oceans? Look at it like this. The Bermuda Triangle is so effing huge. It's bigger than most countries, and it also has a history of heavy ship traffic, generally in the area where most Atlantic hurricanes and water spouts form. Also, until fairly recently, once a ship left the port anywhere, it was difficult, if not impossible, to communicate with them. Also, take into consideration that ships missing their scheduled arrival often made the news. Those same ships showing up like a while later, weeks later, because they got lost, engine trouble, whatever, wouldn't make the news because it's not interesting. So it seems like a lot more ships were missing than than there actually was. So, a lot of ships, dangerous waters, huge area, lack of word from ships going missing. There are a number of natural forces at work in the area known as the Devil's Triangle, any of which could, if the conditions were right, bring down a plane or sink a ship. It's just up to you to decide if that's because of science or magic. Everyone's favorite ghost ship has Bermuda ties. It's the Mary Celebrity Status Celeste. Probably one of the most mysterious stories of shipwrecks, the ship seems to live a life of its own. Despite being found adrift in some other location of the Atlantic Ocean we don't need to care about right now, the connection to the Bermuda Triangle has somehow been invoked to find an answer in the mystery of the Celeste's fate, aka we've reached grasping at straws territory. Discovered on the 4th of December 1872 with everything right in place except for the entire crew, the Celeste was found stranded on seas days after starting its journey from New York to Genoa, Italy. There were supposed to be 7 crew members and Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their daughter aboard the vessel, loaded with raw alcohol. The boat was loaded, by the way, not them to be specific. I mean, I could still be wrong though, because there was also 9 barrels in the cargo that were empty that shouldn't have been. And there was a sword on deck just sort of lying loosely, which isn't the best sign. Still, studies of the ship clearly ruled out the possibility of a pirate attack since everything on the ship, including said barrels of alcohol that weren't empty and valuable belongings, were intact. Many bring up theories that the vessel, while wandering through the Bermuda, their compasses went askew or they hit horrific natural weather, which is what the Triangle is notorious for. The next story is about the crew of the Ellen Austin and their part in the Tale of Two Ships. In 1881, the 210-foot-long oak schooner titled the Ellen Austin was going to New York from London when the cap and the crew stumbled upon a derelict near the Bermuda Triangle. Everything seemed fine with the unidentified schooner derelict that was just drifting aimlessly in the sea, except for the fact that a whole crew appeared to be missing. So Captain Baker of the Ellen Austin decided to observe the derelict for a few days to make sure it wasn't a trap. Decent idea. After 2 days, no response from the ship, the captain entered the abandoned vessel with his crew to find a well-packed shipment and no sign of crew. The decision was made to tow the derelict and its shipment all the way back on the Ellen Austin. The captain placed his prize crew members on the derelict ship to manage it and then set sail together. However, after 2 days of sail on calm waters, a squall separated the path of the two ships and the derelict vanished again. Days after the storm, according to the stories, Captain Baker's lookout spot the vessel through the spyglass only to realize it was drifting aimlessly again. When the Ellen Austin catches up the second time, once again, the entire crew is missing. Story goes on from here that either Captain Baker tried it again and it happened again and he was down to like 5 crew after that so he gave up, or B, he got the heebie-jeebies and abandoned the ship after that first attempt. Other reports suggest that the derelict was once spotted, but this time it had a separate crew than the prize crew placed on it by the Ellen Austin. The ship's disappearance, reappearance, and the prize crew's absence is an intriguing story. The Bermuda is also known for how it took 2 flights one year. On December 28th of 1948, DC-3 commercial flight took off from San Juan with 2 crew members and 29 passengers heading for Miami. On January 30th of 1948, the Star Tiger left from England on its way to Bermuda with 6 crew members and 25 passengers. Both flights were never seen again. When the DC-3 was 50 miles away from Miami, plane captain Lindquist reportedly radioed the Miami airport for landing instructions, and the airport's reply to those was met with silence. See, before they left, Lindquist informed the repair crew that the landing gear warning light was not functioning and that the aircraft batteries were discharged and low on water. But knowing that that would delay the aircraft's scheduled takeoff for Miami, Lindquist actually said the batteries would be fine to be recharged by the aircraft's generators en route. Yeah, no. Star Tiger, prior to taking off, was noted to have endured problems with the heater as well as malfunctioning compass. So to keep the plane at a warmer temperature, they flew extremely low at 2,000 feet, thus eliminating virtually any wiggle room if a problem arose. Also, the low altitude caused the plane to burn fuel much faster than flying at an appropriate height. More boats! This one is trading cargo for mystery. The Panamanian ship Silva El Osa was a cargo ship that was a regular near the mysterious waters of the Bermuda Triangle. But apparently that exposure didn't make it immune, as she vanished in 1976 alongside a 37-person crew. After being directed to the scene 140 miles due west of Bermuda by the United States Navy, an Argentine freighter recovered an overturned lifeboat from the vessel and detected an oil slick. Hours later, a British ship, the Portland Glen, picked up a life preserver from the missing vessel with burn marks on it. Reported in the New York Times, a Coast Guard spokesperson observed the biggest mystery of all, which is that the ship that size wouldn't sink quickly. It was over 590 feet long. The crew should have had time to message for help, set off a flare, get in the rafts, but they were silenced or stopped by something in this tragic mystery. The Coast Guard is reportedly still looking for clues as to what happened. This This next one really is a unique case, my alien people. You're gonna love this. It's 2 missing 2 years. Alright, so James E. Tedford, Lance's 28-year-old wife. The two moved to Vermont to be around family and friends as World War II was wrapping itself up. James has just finished his military service at that time. He has a little more final duties and leaves Pearl at home for a bit. At the end of his second spell of military service, James returned to their rented property in Fletchertown to find his wife missing. Some narratives say the house was also empty. Some narratives say that she had been making dinner and it was still warm on the stove. All narratives agree, however, that James' closest family and friends claim they had no clue as to where his wife had vanished to, and she was last seen at or near a Moco store. Around 1947, a lonely James Tedford sells the home and checks into Bennington Soldier's home after searching for his missing wife for months and then year on end. But see, the story doesn't end, because 2 years after that, James also vanishes. On December 1st, 1949, James was returning to the retirement home from Vermont when he disappeared mysteriously. He got onto a bus and never got off. All 14 passengers who boarded the bus testified to seeing him there sleeping. However, when the bus arrived at its destination, James was gone. No one had seen the old man get off the bus at any point of the journey. Even witnesses said Tedford had boarded the bus and had been on the bus after its last stop before Bennington. Someone was on the bus at all times, and it was not full enough that anyone could leave a notice. His luggage even remained tucked on the luggage rack. This story has the setup of a bad joke. It's the Sarah Joe 5. Seriously, hear me out. 5 friends are castaways on a raft and end up on a desert island. See, doesn't that sound like a joke setup? And while the maritime tragedies and vanishings aren't anything new, it's not often you have one play out this strangely. Things got weird when 5 friends, Ralph, Scott, Benjamin, Patrick, and Peter, went on a fishing trip on a Hawaiian island but never returned. They had a respectably new boat, minimal supplies, but they were strong and healthy men, and they departed February 1979 from the coast of Maui. Friends, family, and authorities mounted a massive search and rescue operation to no avail, and the waves were even tossing search ships so high they were going vertical. The Coast Guard called it off after 5 days, and a massive community search via island air and water ensued. People combed the coastlands, nothing was found, until a decade later. Authorities received information Sarah Joe sighting on the coast of the Marshall Island. Next to the wreck, they discovered the grave of one of the 5 missing persons. The grave was covered with stones and a cross made out of driftwood. Nearby was what looked like a blank pad of notepaper interleaved with aluminum foil. How the boat got there, who buried him, and where the rest were, all questions that baffle researchers and historians. Because sometimes it's not gonna be an X, it's gonna be a Z that marks the spot. Percy Harrison Fawcett was an explorer that had served in the army much of his life before that, but he's one of those explorers who didn't make it big for any particular discovery, more so disappearing during his search for the ancient city called Z in the Amazon jungle. And yes, this is the one they did the movie about in 2016 with Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson. Fawcett, his son Jack, and Jack's close friend Rayleigh Ramel set north towards their hometown base of Cuiabá. Then, when they were 400 miles away from where they started, Fawcett instructed his Brazilian assistants to head back home with a letter for his wife. In said letter, Fawcett advised his wife not to fear failure, but nothing was ever heard of Fawcett, his son, or Rayleigh again. A few years later, a Swiss man reported to have encountered an old Fawcett. Stefan Ratton gathered some reporters and they went out to find this reported Fawcett where they had previously met, and nothing more was ever heard of them or the reporters ever again. Investigators have sent many more expeditions to look for Fawcett, but nothing's ever been found or people disappear themselves. The Kalapalo and Anuhuakua indigenous clans have long since been blamed and implied as the killers, but David Graham, the journalist and writer of the film's book Inspiration, explains the perspective on that. In 1951, the Kalapalos had offered up a skeleton they said belonged to Fawcett, but it actually belonged to the grandfather of the chief who hosted David, in order to prevent more white people from coming into their territory to search for these men. At the time, Life magazine declared the bones were a final chapter in a 25-year-old search, but the Kalapalos tell David Graham what actually happened when Fawcett and his team came through was they gave the men food and warned them not to venture further because hostile clans beyond that point would kill them. The men ignored them and continued on. So people always say the Kalapalos killed the Englishmen. The Kalapalos told Graham, we did not. We tried to save them. This next story is about how Woods vanished into Woods. Terrence Woods did the vanishing, to be specific. He was a producer for Disney and only 27 years old when he was working on the Discovery Channel series Gold Rush, and the episode he was working on when he vanished was about abandoned mines in Idaho. It was October 2018. Early early afternoon. Every shot is going as planned, but suddenly Woods tosses his radio in the dirt and ran down a steep cliff full speed without wiping out somehow and just disappeared in the forest. Or at least that's the story. Terrence has never been seen again. Now I know what you're thinking. What did his co-workers do? Nothing, actually. There's actually a big conspiracy with this case, and many people think this story of Terrence running off just isn't true. His co-workers all say he was acting bizarre, but his family and friends insist he wasn't. When Terrence ran away, they didn't actually go after him, try to contact him, or inform anyone what happened. It was very much a good riddance mindset followed by later guilt. This leads to the assumption of an accidental death. A shocking amount of worksite disappearances are actually covered up deaths because they were caused by safety violations or co-worker squabbles. Somebody may not have pushed him off a cliff, but Terrence could have taken a fall down, let's say, an abandoned mine shaft because someone with an attitude shoulder checked him. I don't think there's a conspiracy necessarily to kill him, but in either scenario, either him running off or his co-workers covering something up, I just think they didn't like the guy and they were able to look the other way when something happened. Terrence was the sole black person in a desolate set in Idaho, and there's a lot of tension with something like that alone. Okay, and last but nowhere near the least is the most recent disaster hitting the history books, the Titanic sub. You say too soon? I say not soon enough. Commentating on history while it unfolds is still history, and what better history to commentate on than that of an ill-advised expenditure in which no one truly considered the risks or took them seriously. Wealth truly is a beautiful thing because it can buy a lot of ignorance, and that's what these companies did. As you probably know, a 5-person crew on a submersible, for those who don't know what that is, it's like a dollar store version of a submarine, and it's kind of controlled by like a video game controller. I'm not making that up. And it's owned by OceanGate Expeditions. Submerged on a dive to the Titanic wreckage site last Sunday morning. Within an hour and 45 minutes, contact's lost. The sub was recorded in an area about 900 miles east of Cape Cod in the North Atlantic in water with a depth of about 13,000 feet. A Coast Guard official said that the people aboard included an operator and 4 mission specialists, a term the company uses for its passengers who are mostly rich tourists that do pay about $250,000 a seat to spend 7 nights in this death trap. Coast Guard has not released the identities of those missing, and OceanGate will not specify how many people they sold tickets to for this trip. Meanwhile, documents are now revealing that OceanGate has been warned there might be catastrophic safety problems posed by the way the experimental vessel was developed. The Coast Guard is focusing on finding this sub right now, but they're also working with military partners and civilians to develop a rescue plan if the vessel is located underwater. The sub has an emergency oxygen and a 96-hour sustainment capability if there's an emergency on board. And currently, as of this morning, that means they'd have 40 hours of oxygen left. How long that 40-hour supply actually lasts depends purely on how many people are inside the sub. If those numbers of hours they gave us as oxygen per person makes a vast difference than if that is a lump hour approximation undivided for a total number of people they won't tell us are in there. If that is the case, they could already be technically close to out of oxygen, and that is why governments and big corporations choose PR wording very carefully. So stay skeptical, stay updated, everybody cross your fingers and pray.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Roanoke Island, North Carolina. Just off the coast of what is now North Carolina, back in August 1587, around 100 English settlers arrived to Roanoke Island. John White, governor of the new colony, had to sail back to England to grab supplies. But while he was away, a naval war broke out between England and Spain, so his commute was delayed just a tad, you know. He got back 3 years later in 1590 with said supplies. He's like, hey, sorry I'm late, we got some naval war traffic, you know how it is. Upon arrival, however, nobody was there anymore, including his wife, daughter, granddaughter, anybody. Among the 100 or so inhabitants, they all vanished. The only hint as to where they went or what even happened was the words Croatoan and Crow carved into a wooden post, and CRO on a tree. Now Croatoan or Croatoan was the name of the Native American tribe that lived on the island as well. But after looking for evidence, theories, even archaeological exploration, experts still can't figure this one out. I've actually been to this island back when I was 16, so this one really creeped me out, not gonna lie. That's why I wanted to start with this one. Number 9, the Mississippians. We'll dial back the calendar to 700 CE. Now at this point, before European colonization, the American Southeast was home to the Mississippians. Their main area was the city called called Cahokia, which is now modern-day Collinsville, Illinois. It's not large either, it's just 6 square miles. Check out this photo of Monk's Mound, a now historic site. We look at ancient Egyptians and our jaws drop at the sight of those pyramids, plus their alignment with the stars. It's all naturally fascinating. Well, Cahokia was once home to pyramids and large wooden structures as well. We're not exactly sure what happened to this 40,000 person civilization, but experts guess famine and disease. Number 8. Catalhoyuk. Another ancient city, another ancient mystery. This time we're looking at what's currently south-central Turkey. About 9,000 years ago, it looked a lot different. Catalhoyuk was popping off until 7,000 years ago, but again, we have no clue what really happened. The most interesting tidbit of history here is the way that this ancient civilization built their homes. They made houses side by side, really close together, and as fitting as it is for this channel, you would say it was almost like a hive-like system. They didn't have doors, they didn't have mail slots or welcome mats. Instead, they had holes on their roofs. That's how they got in and out every day. So yeah, they would use ladders to get in and out, which I gotta say sounds pretty exhausting. They're probably all pretty ripped. Number 7. Mayans. One of the most advanced civilizations on this list, the Maya, were somehow able to create these massive stone structures in the middle of southern Mexico jungles. Next to the Egyptian pyramids, I'd say these are almost just as popular at this point. One of the most interesting pieces of the Maya, I'm sure as we all recall, was their calendar and the way that they worked it. I mean, we made a movie about 2012. The news was talking about 2012. Literally 12 years after Y2K, we're like, what if it happens again? Like, you know, this time seems serious. It's not gonna happen. We're good for now. We're gonna probably end ourselves before a calendar or, you know, a movie does. The Yucatan jungles are filled with pyramids and beautiful complex monuments lost in time, but where did the builders go and why did they leave? Well, a couple scientists analyzed rock samples around these areas and they were able to study the water levels in nearby lakes, suggesting that the reason the Mayans disappeared were not aliens, but rather they collapsed because of a drought. That checks out. Aliens are cool, you know, and the calendar stuff's cool, but no, they're just drought. Number 6. Göbekli Tepe. Just 6 miles from the ancient Turkey city Urfa, Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old. They are these massive stone circles created by a civilization that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. Yeah, it's nuts. We're convinced it's the world's oldest temple, a holy temple rather. Because this area in the world, I mean now it may not be a spectacle, but thousands of years ago, you would be able to see the horizon in every single direction. Herds of beautiful animals racing by, fields of barley and wheat. It would have looked like a temple from Legend of Zelda. Masterpiece. It was actually first discovered back in the 1960s by university anthropologists. They were doing a survey of the region, found this place, and assumed it was an ancient cemetery and then nothing more, and then continued on their merry way. Now cut to 1994, best year ever. Klaus Schmidt was doing surveys for himself, found the same site, and knew right away from the first glance that this was man-made and there was much, much more to it.
Number 5, Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa. Where would the truck drivers across America be if it weren't for the gentleman Jimmy? Probably wealthier, actually, probably wealthier. Your side, my side, your side. Okay, anyway, let me see The Irishman. It's a great movie. For those that don't know or haven't seen The Irishman, Jimmy Hoffa was in charge of the Teamsters Union. More importantly, he was in charge of their finances, their fund. Ooh. Jimmy also had some friends in a certain organization that, let's say, Tony Soprano and Paulie Walnuts belonged to. These Tony Soprano-like characters would go to Jimmy and get loans for their criminal enterprises, mainly new casinos in the beautiful Las Vegas. I'm coming to Vegas. I want to see you so bad. Oh, and interest, of course. You wouldn't loan out money to gangsters without interest. He made a lot of money, too. Well, after being arrested for fraud and losing his union, Jimmy just wouldn't shut up, as they say. And that's really the worst thing you can do around that particular group of Italian Americans. That and put ketchup on your spaghetti. Also, I just want to side note, in Goodfellas, when they're eating dinner, Robert De Niro puts ketchup on a spaghetti. That's wrong. You shouldn't put ketchup on your spaghetti. One day in the 1970s, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared one day before meeting with some goons at a restaurant. And he's been missing ever since. Some people think he's buried under Giant Stadium, some people think he's in a river. We'll never know. We'll just never know. Number 4, Crew of the Mary Celeste. Here's one of the greatest nautical mysteries ever. That, and where my rubber ducky goes when I sit down in the bathtub. I sit down and it disappears. I don't know where it goes. Now, we've all heard about the ghost ships. Some pirates are just so attached to their vessels that they come with them between the ethereal planes. Arr, I love me boat, sir. I don't know. Makes sense, sure. What does not make any sense is what happened to the Celeste in 1872. The ship was found floating in the water. The ship was in good condition, the cargo was still there, tools, everything that, well, a ship would need, except the crew. There was not one person on the boat, and nobody was ever found afterwards, and nobody knows what happened to them. That's creepy, that's weird. It's when there's no evidence, that's when I don't go. That's ghost and I don't go. Number 3, Ambrose Bierce. Ambrose Bierce was a journalist in the 1800s, and as history tells us, not such a pleasant man. He had a sour demeanor, if you will. If you knew there was a very violent and bloody rebellion happening in Mexico, what would you guys do at home? Stay at home or go to witness such events for your journalism and out of boredom? I know someone in the comments is going to say, yeah, I'd go, I'm pretty bored, I'd go. Well, don't, it's bad, don't do it. Well, Ambrose did go, but it wasn't too long after he was there that he sent a correspondence back home saying his next adventure was to be in a place that was unknown to him. He never wrote back again and was never seen again. Some think he manually checked out, while others think the conflict may have had something to do with it. The lesson here, stay home. That's it. Simple. Sit in your chair, watch BumbleBee. You watch me, we'll hang out. It's a good time. It's easy, it's simple. Number 2, Naomi Wimera, a man from Japan with an adventurer's plan. I mean, this guy had done it all, seriously. He went to the North Pole, he took a boat down the Amazon, he was a real adventurer. Best I've ever done is whitewater rafting, which is pretty adrenaline fueled. It's pretty fun, I definitely recommend it. So in 1984, he was going to scale the Ganali Mountains, which are the largest in North America. Didn't know that. He was reported to make it to the top, but he never made it back down to base camp. After missing for some time, there was still no rescue team, as this is the stupidest thing I've heard all week. They didn't want to rescue him because they thought it would offend him by coming to rescue him. That's so stupid. You could have saved his life. Most of his gear was recovered at 17,000 feet. However, he was not, and to this day he has not been recovered. Number 1, Dyatlov Pass incident. You take some Russians, you put them on an expedition, and you throw them out in the Ural wilderness. What could go wrong? How about one of the weirdest cases in history? This expedition was being headed by 9 experienced Soviet trekkers and could handle pretty much anything. Russians know winter. They do love their winter. They know how to handle it. One night in 1959, they went radio silent. When others were sent out to check them the next day, they were found just not living. Tents were cut open, they were wearing inside clothes. 3 of the 9 men had severe physical trauma, 1 with a crushed skull. So the disappearance here really is, what was the beast or monster that got them and then disappeared? Where is the monster? If that thing's still out there, I ain't going. That's scary.
Number 10, the Kaz-2. The Kaz-2 incident took place in 2007, quite recent in comparison to the rest of this list. It took place off the coast of Australia, and it remains a perplexing mystery to this day. Check this out. The yacht was discovered adrift by a rescue helicopter, immediately prompting a search operation that unveiled a puzzling scene. See, when the rescuers approached the Kaz-2, they found the engine still running, the sails partially raised, and all personal belongings, including wallets and identification, all untouched, still on board. The life jackets were also found neatly stowed away. Adding to the mystery surrounding the disappearance of these 3 crew members, an extensive search was launched involving maritime authorities and volunteers, but no trace of the crew could be found. Investigations to the circumstances leading up to the incident revealed that the yacht had been on an adventurous journey along the Australian coastline, with plans to reach the Great Barrier Reef. So one theory suggests that a sudden event, maybe a freak wave or a strong gust of wind, could have caused 1 or more crew members to fall overboard. No life jackets, maybe this happened. The remaining crew might have attempted a rescue but then were unsuccessful, leading to their own disappearance. I mean, who knows? Without any eyewitness accounts or evidence, this explanation remains purely speculative. Number 9, the MV Joyita. The MV Joyita incident occurred in 1955, and it's one of the most enduring maritime mysteries in history. Rhyme. The vessel was a charter fishing boat and embarked on a voyage from Samoa to the Tokelau Islands and never reached its destination, of course. Now, the bizarre circumstances surrounding this discovery weeks later continue to confuse investigators. Again, we have no idea what happened. This is pretty bizarre. When the MV Joyita was eventually found, it was found partially submerged and in a severely damaged state. What the most unsettling part was the complete absence of its 25 passengers and crew members. Lifeboats were missing and there were signs of struggle on board, including including bloodstains and a dislodged radio. So something happened, someone did something. However, despite the alarming conditions, no bodies were ever found either on the vessel or in the surrounding waters. The search for answers began with various theories proposed to explain the disappearance. Some suggest that foul play might have been involved, hence the, red stuff everywhere, pointing to the possible piracy or mutiny, who knows. Others consider the possibility of a tragic accident, such as, again, a rogue wave or structural failure that led to the vessel taking on some amount of water. Comment down below, what do you guys think happened? Because I'm trying to figure this out as I'm going here, and I have no ideas. Terrifying. The ocean's so terrifying. Number 8. The SS Waratah. Once a renowned luxury steamer, the SS Waratah embarked on its ill-fated journey from Durban to Cape Town back in 1909. Now, the ship was operated by the Blue Anchor Line. It was considered one of the most luxurious vessels of its time. However, tragedy struck when the Waratah vanished without a trace right off the coast of South Africa. The ship's disappearance remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries to this day, of course, with 211 passengers and crew members on board. That is a massive amount of crew. The sudden vanishing of the vessel sent shockwaves through the shipping industry. Now, despite extensive search efforts conducted by multiple ships and aircraft, volunteers, you name it, no wreckage, lifeboats, bodies, or any tangible evidence of the Waratah's fate was ever found. Number 7. The USS Cyclops. It was once a massive United States Navy cargo ship. It became one of the most perplexing disappearances of all time. In 1918, during World War I, the Cyclops embarked on a routine voyage from Brazil to Baltimore. With it, it was carrying manganese ore and 309 crew members. However, the ship would never reach its destination. Instead, it plunged into the depths of the Bermuda Triangle. Heard about that one before? The Bermuda Triangle was an area in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean, and it's been long associated with unexplained phenomena and mysterious disappearances. Now, the vanishing of the Cyclops only adds to this enigma surrounding this triangle region, this scary triangle on Earth. But as you've heard from this list, anything could have happened. Waves, mutiny, pirates, just the ocean being the ocean. Really hard to tell at this point. Number 6. The USS Porpoise. The USS Porpoise was an American warship and embarked on a surveying mission in the Pacific Ocean back in 1854, only to, of course, vanish. No ideas. Just me now on YouTube going, hey, any ideas? The ship was carrying a crew of 90 sailors, and they set out on its voyage with the objective of conducting hydrographic surveys and exploring uncharted waters. Pretty brave stuff. We love this. However, the Porpoise and its crew were never seen again, leaving behind this haunting mystery that, again, we still can't solve. I hope that we solve some of these one day, or we find a piece of a boat somewhere so we can maybe scratch one of these off our list, but again, with the ocean being 80% undiscovered, it's probably not going to happen. The ship sailed from Hong Kong, making its way towards the Hawaiian Islands, and it was last heard from on July 22nd, 1854, when it communicated with another vessel, the USS Vincennes. After that communication, that was it. The Porpoise seamlessly vanished from the face of the Earth. Numerous theories have emerged to explain the fate of the USS Porpoise, but none provide any decent explanation. One possibility that we're kind of leaning into is that the USS Porpoise may have encountered navigational difficulties or struck a submerged reef. Those are our main two right there. Let's hope it hit the reef, because I don't even want to know what the other one looks like. Number 5. Original plans. Another theory that surrounds the Queen is that King Tut's chamber was actually meant for her. Yeah, listen to this. The former Antiquities Minister doesn't believe this. He strongly stands by his belief that the lost queen was one of the female mummies found in the Valley of the Kings. What's compelling here, though, is that King Tut passed away at age 19, so many believe his own burial chamber hadn't even been built yet, or finished at least. So instead, they used hers. But a radar survey around the tomb in the Valley of the Kings shows us this hidden chamber behind the north wall of the burial chamber. It's been said before that King Tut's chamber was way too small and there must be more. His stepmom being buried in the same tomb, well, that's certainly a start. We're onto something. Number 4. Tomb alignment. Nobody knows angles like ancient Egyptians. The way they built the pyramids, I mean, they still stand today confidently. We're trying to figure out just how they made the pyramids in the first place. Meanwhile, there's a team inside the pyramids trying to figure out who is even buried in the walls. It's a whole fascinating mystery. Using ground-penetrating radar, researchers were able to find this corridor, this log opening in the bedrock at the exact same depth of King Tut's chamber. And on top of that, these openings are facing the same direction. Tomb KV62 and this new chamber have the same orientation, so of course we're going to believe that they're connected. Because unconnected tombs don't often align, or don't ever align really, so that's also a sign. We're getting close. Let's just give me a shovel. I'll get in there. I'll help out. Be so gentle with everything. I'll feather things off. I've seen National Treasure. Number 3. Brief ruling. The queen was the stepmother of King Tut. Her daughter was married to King Tut, so there's a handful of Egyptologists that believe that right before King Tut's ruling in the 14th century, there was this really small window where Nefertiti ruled as pharaoh. There's also a great deal of historians that believe Nefertiti was no ruler to her husband, King Akhenaten, but we don't have enough evidence quite yet to really know what happened. Hence why we're doing a mystery video on the long lost queen. Now we get it. The reason we're adamant on finding everything we can is because she literally changed Egyptian religion. Number 2. Her family. The queen's name translates to a beautiful woman has come, and given the fact that we still don't know her parentage, we have to use our national treasure brains here. A beautiful woman has come. Come from where? Well, early Egyptologists believe that Queen Nefertiti came from Syria. Back then, it was Mitanni. Her family roots are still debatable, but there's reason to believe that Nefertiti was actually Egyptian born. In fact, many believe she's related to King Akhenaten. We don't really know. The lost queen did have children of her own. She had 6 daughters, like I mentioned before, 2 of which became queens of Egypt. She may have also been the daughter of A, who at the time was an advisor for the king and ended up becoming pharaoh after King Tut's death in 1323. So we have no idea, but we're getting so close. I feel like we're like years away from finding everything we need to know, but also this last point is pretty interesting. Number 1, sun god origins. Okay, one of the most interesting facts about all of this was the religious impact that the queen made on ancient Egypt. Both her and King Akhenaten were in a cult. How fascinating is that? They were in the cult of the sun god Aten. In the earliest accounts of the queen, she assisted her husband in a ritual that smited the female enemies of Egypt at the time. There have been a few blocks that have since been recovered from the Theban tombs of the royal butler that depicts the queen wearing her unique blue crown, so definitely her, part of these sun god rituals. So cut to the end of the king's ruling, the Aten was now Egypt's main god. She made a new god. She convinced everyone to believe in a new god. That's incredible. We can't even decide on who's gonna win America's Got Talent. She's like trading in traditions and religions. That's wild.
Starting us off as usual with something people are more likely to be familiar with. In this case, it's Lauren Spearer. So this happened in 2011 and it reached a wide audience due to celebrity promotion, or just them sharing to make themselves look good. It's a celebrity, it's a 50-50. Anyways, the 20-year-old vanished after spending a late night and early morning partying in a downtown bar in Bloomington. She was last seen walking outside a classmate's off-campus apartment around 4:30 a.m. on June 3rd, 2011, high heels in hand. But 12 years later, investigators have still been unable to locate her. Every tip has been a dead ending, every sighting has been a nix. It's a difficult case from every angle, said private investigator Michael Ciravolo, who was hired by the Spearer family in 2011. Everything that could make it tougher has popped up in front of us. For example, a lack of cooperation from the local police department after they decided to give up on the investigation, and a group of young men who Spearer spent most of her time with, especially on the day she disappeared, are also refusing to cooperate. Good job, gentlemen and boys in blue. Because of you, we may never find this girl or know what happened. Ciravolo said at this point there are no signs indicating Spearer is still alive, but still, the bleak prognosis doesn't change how much he and her parents want to know the truth of what happened to her. I'm never going to give up, Ciravolo says. I feel like I'm looking for a family member. It's become very, very personal and close to my heart. I just wish I could give them closure. Next is a physically impossible event that still somehow must have occurred. The Witchcrafter sunk. Dan Burak and Father Patrick Horgan left Miami's yacht marina in Burak's 23-foot cabin cruiser named the Witchcraft on the night of December 2nd, 1967. They were off to enjoy a spectacular view of Miami's Christmas lights, and right off the bat, let me tell you about this yacht. It was unsinkable. Unsinkable meaning he had a whole bunch of money, and it was one of those ones where the hull was built to remain above water, so it couldn't actually sink, and he had plenty of life-saving gear. The two gentlemen stopped near buoy number 7, as a GPS record indicates, less than a mile from shore. They'd hit something below their ship, and Burak called the Coast Guard to inform them they need a tow to the marina. He was calm and even jovial. The Coast Guard responds immediately and arrives within 19 minutes, yet the ship and its passengers had vanished. Coast Guard expands its search by 1,200 square miles that night, and they even traveled northward to the Gulf Stream in case the ship had been pulled by a brief squall. 6 days of searching? Nothing. 24,500 square miles of ocean covered, yet not even a single trace of the Witchcraft. No explanation has ever been given for the sudden disappearance, and no evidence has ever indicated the ship even sank. All we can assume is the Witchcraft was lost so unexpectedly, Burak didn't even have time to use the flare gun he had on board. You may remember this, Lord knows I do. It's the modern Jewel Thieves. Feels like such an unrealistic movie to do, but it is still slightly possible to successfully accomplish a jewelry or museum heist, as proven by the Dresden Castle heist in November of 2019. My mom went there. It was super cool. She showed me lots of pictures. During the course of a single night, artifacts estimated to be worth over 1 billion euros were lifted from Green Vault within Dresden Castle in Germany. Items stolen included a 49-carat white diamond, a breast star of the Polish Order of the White Eagles, a diamond-encrusted hat clasp, intricate equipolettes, and a scarab and hilt set also studded with diamonds. It was a major haul and involved some of Dresden's most priceless artifacts and treasures. Investigators believe there were up to 7 suspects involved, and none of them have been named, and no evidence of the items has ever emerged. While security experts claim they were being sold on the dark web in 2020, the claims were rejected and nothing new has emerged since. They're likely to join a list of strange items that'll never be recovered, instead hoarded by the 1%ers who use stupid things like this as paperweights. The next all-star lived up to his last name by taking a brisk leave. Who am I talking about? John Brisker. In the early 1970s, he was an all-star forward for the Pittsburgh Condors of the now defunct American Basketball Association. Homeboy was averaging 26 points a game, but his soft shooting touch and quickness were overshadowed by his reputation as a hot-tempered and mouthy type. Example, it once took 4 police officers to subdue him in an off-court tussle. But in February of 1978, not long after hearing a buyout from the Sonics, Brisker up and left suddenly for Africa, supposedly to pursue business interests, and he was never seen again. The supposed business trip was to lay the groundwork for an import-export business that he hoped would resurrect his fortunes and help pay off his creditors. About 6 weeks after leaving, Brisker made his last phone call, and it was to Malvis Diane Williamson, the woman whom he was with, and informing her that he would be sending for her and their young daughter soon, that he has something set up. That's the last anyone hears from him. Rumors start up pretty quick for the unexpected departure. Brisker was on the run from the feds or the mob. Maybe he fell in with dictator Idi Amin, boxing with the wrathful man, coaching his Ugandan national basketball team. Maybe he got on the wrong side of Amin and wound up in the ground. Other stories have him drifting into Guyana and dying in Jonestown in November of 1978. Not actually impossible, and there's lots of theories to dig into why that is, but we'll never know for sure. As Seattle sports writer put it, all anyone knows, the ungentle giant shone briefly for the Supersonics and veered out of sight. This is probably the single most preventable and predictable incident on this list. It's the Sulphur Sinker. The SS Marine Sulphur Queen was originally a T2 tanker ship that converted to carry molten sulfur, which feels like something that should have had its own ship built for it, just in case instead of a DIY job on the old one, but why not give it the benefit of the doubt? So they modified the ship's internal structure, changed the oil carrying tanks to heated tanks that would keep the super hot danger molten sulfur, well, super hot and super dangerous. The weight of the loaded sulfur was 15,260 tons. The ship's last voyage began on the 2nd of February 1963 out of Beaumont, Texas. It only takes 2 days for this very obvious bad idea to really fall apart. Just as the sulfur reached Florida, a regular radio message giving the position of the ship came through, and then nothing else that day, or any days following. As of February 6th, there would be no news from the Sulphur Queen, and it was declared missing. After 19 days of searching, all that's left is some life preservers and debris, but no trace of the ship or the 39-man crew. In the Coast Guard's investigation, they determined that the ship should have never sailed, as it was more unsafe and not seaworthy at all. There were constant fires around the sulfur tanks from leaking sulfur, and the crew gave up trying to deal with them. Not to mention the heavy corrosion making the keel literally a spindly toothpick that could have broken in half. Add insult to injury, the owner of the ship had skipped the routine safety maintenance required of the ship in January before the voyage. This all would result in lengthy litigation between the ship's owner and the families of the missing men. Now we ask ourselves, what happened to Walter? Ain't no way this wasn't a crime. Okay, I'm just saying that for everyone familiar with this case now, thanks to Clint Eastwood and Angelina Jolie tearing it up on the big screen with the 2008 film Changeling. Single mom Christine Collins reported her 9-year-old son Walter missing in March of 1928 from their home in Los Angeles. 5 months later, police brought Walter back to Christine, except it wasn't Walter, and Christine knew it was some stupid little placebo punk kid with a badass attitude. But the LA police dismissed Christine's concerns. She's a single mom in the 1920s, working and living on her own without a man. Culturally, that was her tombstone, and the police went so as far as to accuse her of being a terrible mother and having her committed to a mental hospital. The fake Walter Collins obviously outs the fact that he's a fake. He's 9. How the hell does he know to keep a police secret? The real Walter Collins was never found, and over time, authorities came to believe he was one of the victims of convicted killer Gordon Stewart Northcott, with Northcott's mother even making a confession for Walter's death on her son's behalf. Whatever happened to Walter Collins, his body was never found, and no one actually learned what really happened. happened, nor has it been explained why the police were so invested in covering up the boy's disappearance instead of just trying to find him. Hey guys, can you move that coffin real quick? I need to put a subway here. Thanks. 2,500-year mystery, hot off the press of 2020, past and present collided in a very literal way when a 2,500-year-old killing victim was uncovered during an archaeological dig preceding the installation of a high-speed rail line in London. For those of you unaware, under the Crown it is mandatory for archaeologists to comb a site before anything can happen there. This kind of crap is why. While the cause of death wasn't immediately obvious, it was hoped that with time and further examination, the skeleton would yield more clues about who he was and what become of him. Archaeologist Rachel Wood explained he seems to have had his hands tied and he was face down in the bottom of a ditch. There is not many ways you end up like that. She also continued to say if he was struck across the head with a heavy object, you would find a mark on the back of the skull. If he was stabbed, you'd find blade marks on the ribs. So we're hoping to find something like that to tell us how he died. Interestingly though, the large-scale dig that went ahead of the rail line project revealed more than 60 other ancient sites of interest, including the remains of an ancient village nearby. It would have been in use from 3,000 to 2,000 years ago during the Late Bronze Age and survived until the Roman invasion of southern England 2,000 years ago. When there's only a finite space in which to be, how did we lose 3 lighthouse keepers? In 1896, the Board of Trade funded the construction of a lighthouse on the largest of the Flannan Isles. In December of 1899, the lighthouse was completed and lit for the first time. 4 lighthouse keepers were assigned to maintain the lighthouse and work a rotation of 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off. This meant there's always a bare minimum of 3 men on the island at a time. In mid-December of 1900, the 3 men on the island were 43-year-old principal keeper James Ducat, who had a wife and kids and 20 years of experience, the 40-year-old occasional keeper Donald MacArthur, who was married and covering for the first assistant keeper, and the 28-year-old second assistant keeper Thomas Marshall. Around midnight on December 15th, a steamship Arctur passed the Isles. The captain noticed he couldn't see the light from the lighthouse, and the conditions should have allowed him to. When the Arctur arrived in port, they reported the light absence even though it was never communicated to the Northern Lighthouse Board. On December 26th, the lighthouse tender ship Hesperus made a routine visit to the island, and when near the island, Captain James Harvey found it odd the Scottish flag had been removed from the flagpole. He then sounded the horn to get the attention of the 3 lighthouse keepers, but there's no response. They attempt firing a flare. No response. Island seems normal. Entrance gate and entrance door, and the door after that, all locked. However, the kitchen door is found open, and the fire hadn't been lit for several days, and all of the clocks were stopped, every bed empty, every room untouched, and the bodies of 3 men never found. I hope I never meet the attic neighbor. On an evening of March 31st, 1922, on the Hinterkaifeck farm in Bavaria, Germany, 6 residents are slain with a pickaxe. The victims included a husband and wife, Andreas and Kaliziar Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria, Victoria's kids Kaliziar II and Joseph, and the family maid Maria. Joseph and Maria were both killed while in their beds. However, the rest of the family was then killed in the barn and stacked on top of each other. Let's make this worse somehow than a literal pile of corpses. Investigation concluded that their killer actually lived on the farm for 6 days after smoking the whole family. Cattle were still being fed, meals were still being eaten in the kitchen, neighbors saw smoke from the chimney, and the family dog was tied to a post when the mailman came on Saturday. The bodies were discovered the next day because the dog was still there. And now, for even worse, Maria was actually hired the same day she was killed, replacing the previous maid who had quit 6 months earlier due to the house being haunted. Said maid reported to the family hearing footsteps and voices in the attic. Around the time that the previous maid had quit, the Gruber family also started to hear voices from the attic. Add in a set of house keys had gone missing, and unfamiliar newspapers found in the house that nobody had ever seen before, and now there's scratches on the family tool shed like somebody tried to pick the lock. Maybe it's time to check the attic or move? The father Andreas also reports seeing a pair of footsteps leading from the woods towards the back entrance of the family's house. What did you do? Look at that. Damn, that's crazy. Off to go get killed, I guess. What? Despite repeat arrests, nobody has ever been found, and the files were closed in 1955. The house was also demolished. And last but not least, a puzzling puzzle. In 2011, a mass grave was discovered in southern Poland, dating back 5,000 years, and contained the bones of 15 people, including women, young adults, and only 1 man. The DNA testing shows us that the 15 bodies in total are actually related and belonging to the globular amphora culture, which emerged in Central Europe around 3400 to 2800 BC. Polish experts suggested that the people were executed during a ritual ceremony since the remains were found lying close together, bodies and limbs overlapping, implying a consecutive, if not simultaneous, ending for all in, well, the pile. Sorry. While we might be shocked at such a dark discovery, the scientists called the find a intriguing scene. This is not just because because they're a bunch of tasteless nerds, but because mysteries like these allow them to test their skills, bringing together several disciplines, including forensic archaeology, criminal anthropology, and the genome-wide analysis. And archaeologists can use this technology to better understand not only how this group lived, but also how and why they died. The archaeologists so far concluded that they may have been killed during a time of dwindling food stocks, which would explain why only women, elders, and young adults were found in the sacrificial pit. Artistic reconstructions of this mass grave found in Poland illustrate entwined massive bodies, along with an analysis of their kinship relations. Evidently, these individuals were buried by people who knew them well and who carefully placed them in the grave according to familiar relationship.
Number 10, Roanoke Colony. 1585 Roanoke Island. The first English colony tries their hardest to establish a base for English operations in the New World. Can you imagine what that must have been like to discover all these lands and then encounter the tribes of the Americas? That must have been something. Things were great until they realized more was needed. Supplies, colonists, and well, all the things you need to make an early American settlement. Gotta love it. So a ship was sent back to England to restock. However, when they returned, the colony had all but vanished. There was barely a trace of the colonists. All that was left was a carving in the tree that read Croatoan, whatever that means. Well, that's scary enough for me to Croatoan the heck out of here. Number 9, D.B. Cooper. This is the alias given to an unknown man who woke up one morning and decided to be James Bond. I wish I could be James Bond. Yeah, okay, sure. It's a very strange story. In November of 1971, an airplane was flying from Oregon to Seattle, as they do. This is when our main character here decided to pull a Tommy Vercetti, a Carl Johnson, or a Nico Bellic and appropriate the vehicle for himself. He then managed to ransom $200,000 cash, which I don't know who's carrying that much cash in a plane, but okay, and that would be over the 1 million mark today for you inflation enthusiasts. Then, like a true nutcase, jumped out of the plane and parachuted to safety, finger quote. To this day, we have no idea who D.B. Cooper was. All we know is that some of the ransom money was found in a river a few years later in 1980, which did spark new interest, but not a lot of leads. And that when he bought the airline ticket, it was purchased with cash under the name Dan Cooper. It's suspected that he didn't make the jump, but we just don't know. That's crazy. What a weird story. Number 8, Alcatraz escapees. Nobody gets off the rock. Unless of course you're trying to get to Toronto or something. That's a little newfie humor for you, because we call it the Rock. I don't know why it's cute. Alcatraz, super prison built in the middle of San Francisco Bay to house the country's worst criminals, like Al Capone. Crazy guy. It was a tough place and thought to be inescapable. John Anglin, Clarence Anglin, and France Morris didn't like that idea, so in a total Hollywood-esque escape attempt, they tried, unscrewing vents, constructed makeshift boats from raincoats, life jackets, oars, and all with plumber's glue. Very crazy stuff, very Mythbusters, if you will. And even the classic papier-mâché dummy to throw off the guards. I love the ingenuity. On the evening of June 11th, 1962, they made their escape, and well, yeah, they did it, proving anything is possible, even escaping from a maximum security prison in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Crazy. Thing is, they went missing afterwards, and not the kind that the convicts do when they escape jail, but the same kind of missing when your picture's on the side of a milk carton. Not the good kind of missing. To this day, we do not know what became of the boys who escaped the worst prison on earth. No one's sure. Number 7, Amelia Earhart. What a woman! She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, a role model not only to young pilots everywhere, but also to many young women who wish to have the courage and bravery she showed off every day. She had broken many records and was most likely going to break a lot more, probably a lot more. That's just what she was going to do in July of 1937, except she and her flying partner disappeared. What? Yeah, it's crazy. Seemingly into thin air. A lack of radio communication, and well, nothing was ever recovered. No plane, no Amelia. There's a bunch of running theories on what happened to them. However, my favorite is that the Japanese Empire might have done her in, perhaps thinking she was a spy plane and didn't want the rest of the world to see, well, what Imperial Japan was up to in the Pacific at the time, which it wasn't good. Also, my grandfather talks about this and he says he thinks that's what happened. So the man's been around for a long time. He's been around for 90 years. The guy knows what he's talking about, so we're gonna go with that. Number 6, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Here's one I actually remember. I was actually alive to witness this one. Okay, so I shouldn't sound so proud about that, should I? No, anyway. Okay, so back in March of 2014, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 disappeared. Took off, headed to Beijing, never made it to Beijing. Oh no, said everyone. Planes are supposed to land after they take off. Yes, that's very true. It was presumed that all 300 passengers and crew were lost. So the most expensive investigation in aviation history was underway, searching the South China Sea, but with not much results. Almost nothing, actually. Their best evidence came not too long after, when Malaysian Airlines 17 was brought down by missiles over eastern Ukraine. So the same airline in the same part of the world that's not so free and democratic, well, you can put the pieces together. Still, no one knows for sure what happened to the plane. Ugh.
At number 5, Salem witch trials. Witchcraft, man. It's crazy. Can't trust them witches. Or can you? The Salem witch trials of 1692 remain a misconception to many, as over the years the stories and facts became muddled and confused, so let's set the record straight and solve this mystery. Though many of us have been told that the common method of killing someone who was found guilty of witchcraft was being burnt at the stake, it turns out that this is all just a myth. Burning at the stake wasn't actually ever used, and instead hanging was the preferred method for witch execution. On top of this misconception as to how these so-called witches met their end, there's another mystery, this being what really was this so-called witchcraft. It is believed that what people thought to be witchcraft might have actually been an infection of ergot poisoning. Eating ergot-infected rye may have caused vomiting, hallucinations, and a crawling sensation under the skin, which may have been the bewitchment that people back then were witnessing. At number 4, the Solway Spaceman. Space, the final frontier, and one of the places that holds the most mysteries, aside from our world's oceans, that is. There is so much that remains a mystery to us when it comes to space, like the mystery of the Solway Spaceman. On May 23, 1964, a man and his wife were out one afternoon taking pictures of their daughter. When the film was developed, they saw pictures of their kid, but there was something else a little mysterious in the background. An image of what looked to be a man in a white spacesuit. This rose a lot of red flags, as you can imagine, and so the photograph was reported to the police. No one was able to explain what was up with the astronaut in the background of the photo, and no one was ever able to learn the identity of whoever was floating around. To this day, this image remains one of the most perplexing photographs in history, just adding to yet another unsolved historical phenomenon. At number 3, Adelaide Bartlett. Now I think this next one could possibly be considered to be a true crime story, but I guess you guys can be the judge of that. Up next to the plate, we have the unsolved mystery of Adelaide Bartlett and the supposedly impossible killing of her husband. In 1886, a woman named Adelaide Bartlett stood trial accused of killing her husband. It was believed that Adelaide took her husband's life by making him ingest chloroform, but she ended up being found not guilty by the jury because no one could figure out how the poison was administered to her husband. When chloroform is ingested, it would cause intense vomiting, and it would have left traces in the esophagus as well, so people would have been able to determine how this killed the victim. However, because these clues were never found in the case of Adelaide's husband, nothing really came of it, and the crime became an unsolved mystery. Many years later, it was theorized that perhaps Adelaide mixed the poison in with brandy, which would have made it possible to swallow the poison without leaving a trace. But so far, that's just the best theory that we have, and we haven't been able to solve the mystery. At number 2, Dr. Crippen. Moving on to another pretty wild true crime case that went unsolved is the case of Dr. Crippen. Back in 1910, Dr. Crippen became one of Britain's most infamous murderers after the body of his wife Cora was found in the basement of the couple's home. Punishment was pretty swift in this case, and the doctor was arrested, tried, found guilty, and ultimately executed. For years, this just remained a closed case, but in 2007, DNA testing blew the doors off this case when it was discovered that not only was the body that was found in the basement not Crippen's wife Cora, but it was actually the body of a man. Evidence later showed that Dr. Crippen was innocent and that he was wrongfully executed. Now the question remains, what really happened back then? But we may never get the answers that we need. And finally, at number 1, the devil's footprints. Nothing says spooky mystery quite like the devil, right? This next unsolved mystery dates all the way back to the morning of February 9th, 1855, where people in towns all across southern Devon awoke to find a trail of hoof-like marks in a single line in the snow. Witnesses described these markings, saying that it looked like it had been branded into the snow with a hot iron. It was reported that these strange marks were were found over a distance of 40 miles, with one source describing it as, quote, some strange and mysterious animal endowed with the power of ubiquity and created them during the night, end quote. To this day, these bizarre markings were never explained, though some had theories ranging from escaped kangaroos to badgers and even mice. Others believed that the hoof marks were the work of the devil himself. Still, this remains a mystery, as it was said that, quote, no known animal could have traversed this extent of country in one night, neither does any known animal walk in a line of single footsteps, not even a man, end quote.
Number 10. He was never found. November 1971 was a day just like any other. It was the 70s, so life was good, or so that's what I'm told from people who lived through the 70s. I don't know, I wasn't there. An airplane was flying from Oregon to Seattle. This is where our main character appropriated the vehicle for himself, where he managed to ransom $200,000 cash. Then, like a true nutcase, jumped out of said airplane and parachuted to safety. More on that later. To this day, we have no idea who D.B. Cooper was. All we know is that some of the ransom money was found by a river in 1980. Again, more on that later. Which did spark new interest, but not a lot of new leads. All we really do know is that he bought the airline ticket with cash under the name Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper. Multiple theories exist about who he may be, including a man named Richard Fly McCoy, who had done similar crimes. The FBI isn't convinced, as today D.B. Cooper remains the only air piracy case still unsolved. Number 9. The name's Bond. James Bond. That's right, lass. Part of the mystery or fascination of the D.B. Cooper case is how slick it was, how it went so smooth, oh yes, almost without a hitch, very similar to the aerial escapades of a certain MI6 spy. The comparisons are pretty easy to make, especially when you consider what the man was wearing at the time, a full black suit and tie with a black briefcase. According to witnesses on the scene, he had a very pleasant and charming demeanor, just like Mr. Bond, yes. Ordered 2 bourbons from the booze cart, paid his bill, and even offered to tip the flight attendant. Very Sean Connery of you, yes. Even during the theft of the plane, he kept his cool as he instructed pilots to fly low in order for him to complete his jump from the plane. That's just what a crazy story. Number 8. Fake agent. This is too strange not to talk about. So 2 weeks before the D.B. Cooper incident, a man on another plane sat down with some pilots. Now this was the 70s, so you could do that if you were smooth enough and wealthy enough. While he was there, he was telling the pilots that he was a big shot in the movie business and was asking aviation questions relating to a load dropping out of a plane and landing in a specific spot. For a movie. Yeah, that makes sense, sure. For a movie he was helping to make, even handing out a pamphlet of the movie. The non-existent movie. Weird. The man's description matched that of a witness who saw D.B. Cooper at that incident. When the pilots of the plane with the movie mogul were interviewed, they couldn't remember the name of the movie, pamphlet, or that of the man that they let sit with them. That sounds like an inside job. I don't know. It's weird. That's weird. Number 7. Rest in peace. A good reason no one has ever heard or saw him again is that there's a slight chance he didn't make it. And by slight, I mean a good chance he didn't make it. Okay, let's say you were going to jump out of a plane at night, carrying pounds and pounds of cold hard cash with you. If you ever played Payday, you know what I'm talking about. It's heavy. And you're flying low to the ground with low visibility. You wouldn't have much time to maneuver your parachute. Then you have to deal with being in the middle of the Washington wilderness. This is the 1970s, so that means no cell phones, no GPS. Some experts believe he perished in the fall, or the wilderness claimed him. No one's really sure. The only thing I can think of is that maybe he had a map and some small survival gear in his briefcase, instead of what he actually said he had in there. At least enough to get him out of the woods and then back to civilization. I think, that's my theory, I don't know. Number 6, interview. In 1972, the Seattle Flag held an interview with a man claiming to be the man who made the daring criminal escapade. Their evidence was that they had one of the $20 bills he stole from the plane. The paper also claimed that they had gone to great lengths to confirm that this was in fact the crook they were looking for. This is the crook you're looking for. But I also used to tell Miss Middleton in English class that I read the books that she assigned for the class, when in reality I used Cliff Notes and then only read about 5 pages of the book. I'm sorry, it just wasn't happening. Then I charmed the rest of my way through her class. Yeah, nice, great. The interview is interesting as the mystery man claims there was no accomplice on the ground and that he will return after 5 years when the statute of limitations expired. Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna happen, dude. You're gonna do a crime, come back 5 years later? You can't just Doesn't work like that. Can't do that. Number 5, plot device. If you're gonna take something away from all of this, I guess it's that, well, it just makes a good story. Heck, it's why I'm standing here before you today. It shouldn't come as a surprise that D.B. Cooper gets used as a theme or plot device in Hollywood. It's naturally a good story, so all you have to do is add, like, I don't know, say for example, 3 estranged friends go on a camping trip to honor the loss of their 4th buddy, but after a menagerie of misfortunes bestow upon them in the forest, they come across the remains of D.B. Cooper and his fortune. Poor guys were up a creek without a paddle. What would we call that movie? Huh. He's been mentioned in books, shows, movies, and for me, one of the silliest quips from Saul Goodman is him describing Walter's Heisenberg attire as D.B. Cooper. Why so mysterious? D.B. Cooper. Number 4. Lost loot. In February of 1980, as I mentioned before, a few months shy of a decade since the caper had been done, some bundled money was found near Vancouver, Washington. Naturally, they had degraded over time because, well, it's paper money and water and just makes sense. The vending machine wasn't going to accept them, but after some thorough investigation, it was confirmed that the money did in fact belong to the stash that he stole. It seems though that this brought up more questions than answers. How did the bills end up on the riverbank? When did they wash up? Why did they wash up? How did they wash up? And why did one of the 3 stacks only have 90 bills instead of 100 like the other stacks? That doesn't make any sense. What? In better news though, the kid who stumbled across the money got to keep it and in 2008 sold it at auction for a small fortune of his own. So there's some good news. I like that. That's good news. We like that. Number 3, copycats. This happens with a lot of capers, crimes, or well, just craziness in general. Crazy makes crazy. In the D.B. Cooper case, it made a lot of crazy. In 1972 alone, 15 copycat attempts were made, and some of them were more successful than you might think, or at least hope to. The most unusual was done by a man named Frank Manahan. In 1972, Frank took over a plane from Pennsylvania and asked for $303,000, cigarettes, food, parachutes, knives, and a helmet, because yeah, that's what you need. When they landed, he let everyone off except for 6 crew members, and when he was given his cash, decided that 100 bills simply wasn't a large enough denomination, and demanded the pilot fly back up. Sure, okay, eventually he jumped out of the plane, just like D.B. Cooper did, except he was over the Honduras jungle. It didn't go very well, because he turned himself in after weeks on the run in the jungle, so, you know, maybe pick Washington's a little bit better in the jungle, I guess, you know? I don't know. Number 2, security. After the files for people stealing money and jumping out of airplanes started piling up on the FBI's desk, it was clear that things needed to change. I mean, come on, 15 cases in 1 year? It's a little much. So in 1973, bag checks and security were done for the first time in airports across America. Hard to ever imagine an airport without them, really. Airplanes were built much more securely and peepholes were added, so you could see what was going on between the cabin and the main area. Most importantly, I think, is now that you can't open airplane doors on passenger aircraft whilst it is in the air, mainly because of the D.B. Cooper incident. So, in case you try to go for a little fly zone, you can't do it. Can't do it, dude, because of him. Sorry, man, you ruined it for you. Number 1, still alive. Sort of. Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam vet who was arrested in 1978 for trying to fake his own death, and a subject of a book that highlights his aerial escapes. Not to mention his uncanny likeness to be D.B. Cooper, well, he was thought to actually be D.B. Cooper. All these clues certainly had the FBI intrigued, but even with his confession of being D.B. Cooper, they still weren't convinced. It's just really too hard to tell. Robert passed away in 2019, so I guess we'll just never know. He confessed to it, but he didn't, you know what I mean? We need 2 confessions to put someone away. That's how it works nowadays. You need 2.